you don't have time to be bored. That's for sure. So I love that because people around me will tell you I have a fair bit of energy, and if I don't spend it, I am unbearable.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. When we think of French cuisine, we don't often think about brew pubs, or in fact beer, but beer is a large part of French culture in a very different way to that in Australia. But what does French food offering look like in a brewery setting in Australia? Thomas Cauquil is the head chef and co-owner of Frenchies Bistro and Brewery in Sydney. Thomas, how are you?
I'm good, very good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. It's really good to get you on the show. You've got a pretty fascinating and unique offering in Australia. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, we've set up Frenchies 5 years ago. We are almost at our birthday soon, so that's close to celebrate. Look, we've started that with my friend Vince, that's looking after the brewery part. So he's been a brewer for a while, and I've been a chef for a while. And a while ago, we decided to combine our passions, our knowledge, and do a venue together. We were going to set that up in France, and life came in the way, and we ended up here in Australia, which is a good thing. We're really happy about that. So yeah, we've come a long way, and what we are trying to do is to bring for Vince his passion for beers, for European style beers, but of course any other trends in beers that exist in craft beer. And for me, well, I've trained a lot in Europe in many different kitchens. And so I'm bringing what I know, the techniques I've learned throughout those experiences, but trying to focus on what Australia has to offer in terms of producers, in terms of suppliers, and we follow that. I'm not trying to do some traditional French cuisine. We're trying to have a little bit of a more modern approach, and yeah, we try to create a symbiosis between the beers, the food, and make that work all together.
That's fascinating that you say that the idea was originally to do back in France. Is the concept different to what you envisaged, what you'd be doing in France, to what you've actually created here in Australia?
It's hard to say, because when we first thought about doing something together with Vince, our idea was like, we like good food, we like good beer. We didn't push the concept much further than that at that stage. So the idea was just to do something together, because we did a lot of things outside of work and studies together. So that's where we were at. And when it came down to create a concept, that happened more when we were in Australia. So we pushed the thinking about what to do when we were here, and obviously we tried to adapt to where we were. And even since we started, the concept has evolved a lot, because, when you start, you make mistakes. So yeah, we've tried to do things that please people and that work for everyone. And I think today we're at that point.
Well, I want to talk a bit more about Frenchies shortly, but take us back to when you were growing up. Tell us about where you grew up and what sort of role food played in your family.
Well, my family traveled a lot. So when I was young, because my dad changed jobs often. We moved to Brazil, we moved to Sweden, we moved to Spain at a young age. So in terms of food, that had obviously a strong influence. Every time we were going to live overseas, my parents were quite curious people, and they were trying to submerge themselves and us kids, because I have two siblings, into the culture of the country, and that the culture goes a lot through food. So yeah, that had a strong influence. Both my parents, even my grandparents, there are people that like to eat and share the moment around food as well on a large family setting. Having those big lunches or dinners with a lot of people. So that's always been. I've always grown up in that. And afterwards, at some stage when I was a little bit younger, I wasn't sure about what to do, what path to take, and food through a job experience happened, and I liked it, so I pursued that idea.
Well, before we get to that, take us back to your family. With a family that's really fascinated and find food important to everyday life. Do you have any dishes or feasts that you can tell us about that you remember from when you were young?
I remember my grandparents lived in Morocco long time ago, and I remember those lunch where my grandmother would cook us couscous that she learned with a maid actually when they were living in Marrakesh, and that's a strong memory because it was a nice moment with the whole family. I remember. Yeah, us sharing that dish that's made for that to be shared amongst a lot of people. So that's a strong memory. And then I remember through our travels, I remember a few culinary experiences that were not necessarily high gastronomy, but that impressed me, especially when we were young. Eating different things, random things that we not necessarily used to eat in Europe. I remember eating a guinea pig in Peru. I remember eating whale in Norway. Those kind of things. So they impress you when you're a kid, and I think they leave a mark, a curiosity at least for what you can find according to the place you're in.
You mentioned that you have a background and experience in Michelin star restaurants. Take us back to those restaurants. What were the real sort of influential venues and people that you worked with?
So my studies were not very focused on cooking. So after studying in Paris, it was more like a management, hospitality kind of thing. And I wanted to cook. I wanted to be a chef. So I went into... my first experience was in Madrid, in Spain, mostly because I loved living in Spain when I was younger. And I went to this one Michelin star called El Chaflan. It was really hard because I was not prepared for this kind of ambience. The head chef was doing this molecular cuisine that was very trendy back then. It was the rise of El Bulli in Barcelona, and that head chef was following that trend. So it was definitely interesting. It was something that I was absolutely not familiar with. So lots of things to learn. It's a very strong experience, although it's probably my shortest one. I only lasted 5 months in that place. But yeah, it was intense. Very old school management, if you know what I mean. And after, so that put me off a little bit in regards to those kind of work ambience. So I went back to France there was this trend that was developing back then. I went to Toulouse in the south of France. That's called bistronomy. The idea of that trend is to bring the gastronomic techniques and knowledge into a more laid-back atmosphere of a restaurant, something a little bit more simple, something a little bit more cheap as well, to reach a wider crowd with good food. So I went to work in that. It was a very small restaurant. We were two with the head chef, myself and the head chef. So you do learn a lot. There's a lot of work to be done, but you learn a lot, and it was a good base for after going back into a Michelin star in Paris. So something a little bit more traditional than my first Michelin star. It was with Christian Constant. He's a big chef, so he's retired now, but he trained a lot of the very famous chefs that that are still going in France right now. And yeah, I worked with him for a year and kept on going through different restaurants in Paris for 5 or 6 years before I came to Australia.
Tell me about your relationship with Vince, your business partner. When did you guys first meet, and tell us about the evolution of this concept that you ended up with for Frenchies?
So Vince, we met in 2005 when we were studying in Paris. So Vince came from a very different background of studies. He went into a business school in Germany. And that wasn't for him, so he ended up in this same hospitality school, and we met there, and we developed a strong friendship back then already. Then after school, like I said, I went to work. He kept on studying, but we were not living in the same place because I went to Spain, I went to Toulouse, and he stayed in between Paris and the Alps. French Alps, but we kept that relationship. We did some big trips together, so that's through traveling a lot. We kept it going. We did some pretty cool trips, like cycling from Paris to Istanbul. We went to Russia, which is not a very high popular place at the moment, but still, back then it was cool. We went to Russia for an expedition in very remote Kamchatka. So strong bonding over traveling, and through this travel, we started thinking about what we like to do. I liked chefing. He was already brewing beer in his garage, but still, it's a start. And we thought we had that idea in mind of bringing that together. How it came along. He was in this last year of studying, and he had to do one more year, which was meant to be to develop a professional project. So the idea was to put that to use, to work on that. But before doing his last year, and after we traveled to Russia, he said, I'm going to take a year off of school and I'm going to go to Australia. That was his thing, because he's like, okay, I'm going to go surfing for a year, doing the classic working holiday visa. And the attraction for Australia was not only about the sun, the beaches and the surf. It was because the craft beer scene was way more developed in Australia than it was back then in France. So it's picked up in France now, but back then it was much more of a thing. So he came here, he surfed, he enjoyed everything, but eventually he found a job in a brewery, in a microbrewery in Port Macquarie. So the guy ended up sponsoring him. So he's like, okay, maybe I take one more year, I stay here, I learn the tricks. The job happened to be really good. So he stayed another year, and then after he found a girlfriend that he actually married today. So at some stage I was like, okay, you're not coming back, I'm gonna come. So I came, and we thought it would be a good idea to start here, because I did like Australia. I didn't have that fervor that Vince had for Australia at the beginning, but I was like, yeah, I mean, I was a bit at the end of a cycle back in France. I was like, okay, I'm going to come here. I think it's a great place to be. I think as a chef, there's a lot of things to be done, because the food scene, everything needed to be, not everything, but there was a lot of space to be doing things, probably much more than back in Paris, where I came from, where the concentration of chefs and restaurants is much stronger. And we said, okay, let's do it here. We decided for Sydney, because we wanted something big. Back then we were in Port Macquarie. It's a bit small, maybe, to start a restaurant, and there were already a couple of good restaurants for a very small town. Sydney seemed to be the right place in terms of lifestyle, in terms of food scene, and life balance. Sounded good.
tell us about the period of time leading up to finding a site and delivering Frenchies to the market. Did you work in Sydney during that time before opening the restaurant?
So yes, it took us a long time because we moved to Sydney, and by the time we finalized the concept, raised the money, we tried to find a place to set it up. That took forever, especially probably because it was also our first time, and I mean we were trying to figure things out along the way in terms of structure, etc. So that took a while. We found the first venue that actually didn't go through, so that put us back a good year. And in the meantime, we were obviously working because living in Sydney ain't cheap. So we worked together in a small brew pub. For him, it was great, I think, because the system was very small, but it was the first time he was working by himself as a head brewer. So a lot of space for him to develop his skills, and put in place what he had in mind on a small scale, and to try a lot of different beer styles, see what works, see what's not. So I worked there as well in the kitchen of that brew pub for a while. I did lots of different jobs, agency jobs, just to keep it going. And I worked as well, which is more relevant, at a restaurant of a good friend of mine now, Mox. He's from Belgium. It's a seafood restaurant. And that was a great experience because he's very passionate. He set up his restaurant 7 years ago now. So for him, it was a new adventure as well. And I could see what it takes to create relationship with suppliers, to connect with your local food environment. And he was great because he was very much into that. And he gave me a lot of tips, ideas, etc. So that was my best experience of work experience in Australia. And after we had to start Frenchies at some stage, and we found this location in Rosebery, and we're good. We're really good.
You mentioned a bit earlier the challenges in the first couple of years and evolving the offering. Tell us about sort of what it was and how much it's evolved and compared to what you're doing now.
Well, when you start a business, especially me, I am a guy of principles. So I have a lot of ideas that I want to do. And it's hard to make a selection between what you have in your head and what people want. So especially at the beginning, you want to do what you have in your head. So I wanted to bring what I've been trained for, this bistronomy concept into Sydney, which was not something that was very defined on the food scene, and I think it was a bit too much, especially at the beginning. So it started well because when you launch a restaurant, you get a lot of following. You manage to get good press. I mean, what we were doing was good, but on the long run, we lost track of the interest in people. And because the food scene in Sydney is so dynamic, there's always new things opening, especially back then. Maybe today it's a bit more quiet, but still, then people forget about you because they like to try new things. They like to keep up with what's trendy, what's in the moment. So we struggled after 6 months, and we tried different things. After the first lockdown, we reopened, and I was like, okay, we're going to try to do something a little bit more high-end. So we went to a full degustation dinner concept, which was pretty good actually, and I think it suited the needs of back then, because after the first lockdown, people were keen to go back out to spend some money, to have a good food experience. So that worked well, and especially with all these limitations that we had to in terms of capacity and stuff. It was good. It made it easy to manage. So we kept that between the two lockdowns, and when we reopened in the last one, we changed again because we wanted to grow, especially on the brewery side. We were attracting a lot of food lovers. That was our customer base, but we wanted to strengthen the relationship between the beer side and the food side, and to reach better beer people. We thought that it would be nicer to create a share offering, something a little bit more convivial, a little bit more laid back than like a degustation dinner. That's a bit fancy. So we're still doing the same quality of food, but the way we offer it is a little bit different, and we keep the degustation offering just for special events that occur once in a while throughout the year.
Tell us a bit about your food. Can you share sort of some insights in with a dish or two that you have on the menu at the moment, so that sort of speaks of what you're doing?
So the food that I do, like I said, it's influenced by the techniques that I've done back in France, so French techniques. What I try to do is to not be too traditional. Like when you go to what you think is a French restaurant, you think of confit duck, raclette, those very, very heavy traditional dishes, and the whole menu being designed like that. I try to stay away from that. We want to offer something that's a little bit more seasonal, and that's more looking after the produce that we have at hand in Sydney, in Australia, in general. So the menu changes according to what the market has to offer, especially for the seafood a lot. Like I go there twice a week, and we change it according to what there is, and then we adapt. So what you can find on the menu will change, and then you have things that don't change because they are popular, because we like to offer those kind of produce. I do a lot of charcuterie, so a lot of pâté en croûte. There's always a pâté en croûte on the menu. The filling changes from week to week, but that's always on the menu. And a lot of cured meats that we do. I have a strong passion for charcuterie. I can talk about it a lot. Terrines, rillettes, pancettas. I mean, all these kind of things that we do ourselves, obviously, they're always on the menu. And then, we offer all sorts of mains. You can find a confit duck from time to time on the menu. I don't have anything against it, but yeah. trying to be a little bit more modern in our approach.
Well, it's such a unique venue, and given that there is beer being brewed and then your French inspired food, do you work together to try and match the beers with the food, and does that change what you're doing in the kitchen?
Always. So we actually even try in the kitchen to use his products. So cooking with beer is a little bit tricky, because when you cook the hops, they become more bitter, so it can ruin a dish very easily. So we use sometimes some beer to cook sous vide, etc. And then, especially on the pastry side of, I have a great sous chef. She's a pastry chef, and so she uses hops, like raw hops or malt in her desserts, in her doughs, in infusions to flavor her desserts, because that works very well with sweets. So that's what we do in the kitchen, and then on the floor, my manager that looks after the drinks list, etc. He tries to push our customer and encourage them to try new stuff. There's no problem. You come at Frenchies, you can try all the beers before you pick yours, because it's about explaining to people first what we have, because the beers change a lot on tap, and then encourage them to go away from wine pairing with their meal, and try to enjoy different styles of beer with different types of food. So that's what he does every day. And then, especially when we have some special events with degustation menu, we always offer a pairing per dish with wine and with beer. We always put our beers forward.
Tell me a bit about Bastille Day. Do you have any stories from when you were young and what that sort of day means to you?
So when I was young, not so much, especially because I lived overseas a fair bit. For me, Bastille Day in France, it's on the 14th of July. How do you call them? The firemen. They organize a ball in their stations. So there's music and people go. Especially all the girls, they like to go and dance with the firemen. So that's what Bastille Day is for me. And I'm not so keen in going to dance with the firemen. But it's crazy. I was actually very surprised that it's so much of a thing here in Australia. So we got along, like, since we've been here, there's a big French festival organized in Cauquil. For Bastille Day, so we've always taken part in this festival. We're going back again this year, so we provide some beers, and then we have a food stall where we try to have that. In those festivals, I do offer a little bit more of traditional French food, because it's a French festival. I'm not gonna get away with it. This is what people want, and yeah, they want the nostalgia of French food, so I stick to that. And then at Frenchies, we celebrate it as well. Like, the last couple of years have been complicated, but this year we do a whole week where the menu is that traditional French food. I try to do something that's nice, something that people enjoy, and we try to do it well.
Tell us about what you've got on offer that day.
So for the whole week of Bastille Day, at night, we're going to be offering a 4-course menu. The first course is a pâté en croûte. So yeah, like I said, it may be a little bit different to the image of a super traditional pâté en croûte that people have in mind. I've trained with a guy in Paris for a couple of months 6 years ago, and he has a little bit more modern approach to what charcuterie needs to be. So I'm using what he's taught me. So that's for the pâté en croûte. The second dish is it's a fish quenelle. So there's that's a dish that comes from Lyon, the Burgundy region. So it's a pike quenelle, white fish with a crayfish creamy sauce. Quite rich, but very, 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 very good. The third dish is a cassoulet. So cassoulet cannot get more traditional than that. So actually, the head chef that I had in Paris, the one Michelin star, he came from Montauban. It's a little village in the southwest of France, at the center of cassoulet region, and he was doing this cassoulet, this exact same cassoulet as we're doing, in all his restaurants, even in the one Michelin star, all the restaurant that he had, there was a cassoulet. So that's what we're doing, and obviously all the elements of the cassoulet. There's a lot of charcuterie. There's a pistachio saucisson. There's a confit-lard. There's some duck. There's a Toulouse sausage. All of that we make ourselves. And for dessert, she's going to make, I think it's a lavender creme brulee. Doesn't get more traditional than that, but you know, when we do stuff like that's traditional. There's no, to my sense at least, big surprise in the writing of the menu. We try to do that very well, because that's the only thing that matters anymore.
You didn't have plans to come to Australia, but has the experience changed you in the way that you cook?
Of course, because I've learned new things in the way that people work. first. It's very different how you work in a team in Australia, and at least what I've been taught when I was back in France. So that taught me a lot of things for that. And the way I cook, first of all, you need to use the produce that you have here. I've learned a lot about fish. The Sydney fish market is amazing, and I've been working in regions that are not on the coastal regions, so I was dealing with more meat than fish. So I learned a lot about that. I learned how to use them. There's some amazing produce. And then through all the people that I worked with at Frenchies, well, when you bring new people in the team, they come with their defects, but mostly most of them with their qualities, and you learn from them. So I've learned things with those people too. I mean, you cannot stop changing when you still work. If you stop working, well, you will stay where you are. But yeah, through the experience makes you evolve, of course.
You've created a truly unique venue in Australia. What do you love about what you do?
It's never boring. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, but it's never boring. I mean, I've been working a lot on the kitchen side in the last years. Right now, we're trying to develop the business. So I have a great team in place at the moment. So I'm taking advantage of that to step back a little and do something else, help the business grow. And having this double role in the business, having to look after the production in the kitchen, but as well managing a business on a day-to-day basis, you don't have time to be bored. That's for sure. So I love that, because people around me would tell you I have a fair bit of energy, and if I don't spend it, I am unbearable.
Well, Thomas, it's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Congratulations on what you've built there. Keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.